Hola. Here to do a live. With some excerpts from my favorite book, a Bible, really. To start with, but this came up this past week, particularly as it relates to, let me just check my. And we're back, I believe, on the right network. Perfect. So, like match, light my candle here. Incense match. Don't you love it when don't you love it when you blow up the match and the candle? So this book, if you have something that you'd like me to read or share from, do let me know. But I do have a list actually. Let me show you. Of course, the colored girls pick up the section. Lillian by the same author, which is another favorite. This is definitely a coming of age. Brief little story. I got this book after I was lent this book in high school for my OAC writing class, and from my mom borrowed it from another Black mom. Her daughters had already had a family of 5 daughters, and their daughters had already graduated. And she said that this book was really impactful. I was going through mental health stuff at the time. And so this has become a staple in my library for sure. So this is something I will be definitely sharing from. And then my love for intrinsic came through. And when I went to university, my first year, I brought this and I had it in my dorm room. And a fellow, she wasn't my roommate, but someone down the hall, another Black girl, wanted to borrow the book and she never gave it back. And I was devastated. And then I was back home and I went to a bookstore randomly, and this book was $5 in the sale section. Felt like it was divine. Oh, Octavia the Second, the sequel to Parable of the Sower. And She by Saul Williams. This has been beat up. It's definitely favorite as well. So, but we're going to start with the women who run with kids. So I have a couple of sections I'd like to read and speak to and share. Again, this book came out, so I've had this book probably 15 years at least, maybe longer. And I will come back to it again and again. This new moon in Taurus invited me to sit with this book and pull out some scriptures, some moments that might resonate. So, some stories that might resonate. So I wanted to share that. So this is, I will first read a brief story and then go into the third chapter, which is titled Nosing of the Facts, the Retrieval of Intuition as Initiation. But we're going to go back to the previous chapter. The previous chapter being Stalking the Intruder, the Beginning Initiation. And the title of this section is called Giving the Cry. When Bluebeard bells for his wife, she stalls for dear time. She is trying to rouse energy to overwhelm the captor, whether that specifically or in combination be a destructive religion, husband, family, culture, or a woman's negative complexes. Bluebeard's wife pleads for her life, but craftily. Please, she whispers, allow me to prepare for my death. Yes, he snarls, but be ready. The young woman summons her psychic brothers. What do these represent in a woman's psyche? They are the more muscled, the naturally aggressive propellants of the psyche. They represent the force within a woman that can act when it is time to kill off malignant impulses. Although this attribute here portrayed by the male gender, it can be portrayed by either gender. Of course, this is written in the 90s, so know that there are more genders. And by other things which are genderless, such as the mountain which snaps shut on the intruder, the sun which descends for an instant to burn the marauder to a crisp. The wife races up the stairs into her chamber and posts her sisters on the ramparts. She cries up to her sisters, do you see our brothers coming yet? And her sisters call down that they see nothing yet. As Bluebeard roars for his wife to come to the cellar so he can behead her, again she cries, do you see our brothers coming? And her sisters call down that perhaps they see a little dust devil or a whirlwind, often distant. Here we have the entire scenario of a woman's surge of intrapsychic power. Her sisters, the wiser one, take center stage in this last initiatory step. They become her eyes. The woman's cry travels over a long intrapsychic distance to where her brothers live, to where those aspects of psyche are trained to fight to the death if necessary. Live. Oh, sorry, go back. The woman's cries travel over a long intrapsychic distance to where her brothers live, to where those aspects of psyche are trained to fight to the death if necessary, live. But initially, the defending aspects of psyche are not immediately as close to consciousness as they ought to be. Many women's equality and fighting natures are not as close to consciousness as is efficient. A woman must practice calling up or conjuring her conscientious nature, her whirlwind, dust devil-like attributes. The symbol of a whirling wind represents a central force of determination, which, when focused rather than scattered, gives tremendous energy to a woman. With this more fierce attitude at the ready, she will not lose consciousness, nor be interred along with the rest. She will solve, for once and for all, the interior woman killing, her loss of libido, her loss of passion for life. While the key questions provide the opening and loosening required for her liberation, without the eyes of the sisters, without the muscle of the sword-wielding brothers, she cannot fully succeed. Bluebeard shouts for his wife and begins to climb up the stone steps. His wife cries to her sisters, and do you see them now? Her sisters cry down, yes, we see them. They are almost here. Her brothers gallop down the hall. They charge into her room and drive Bluebeard out on the parapet. There, with swords, they kill him and leave what is left of him for the carrion eaters. When the women resurface from their naivete, they draw with them and to themselves something unexplored. In this case, the now wiser woman draws an internal masculine energy to her aid. In Jungian psychology, this element has been named animus, a partly mortal, partly instinctual, partly cultural element of a woman's psyche that shows up in fairy tales and in dream symbols as her son, husband, stranger, and or lover, possibly threatening, depending on her psychic circumstances of the moment. This psychic figure is particularly valuable because it is invested with qualities that are traditionally bred out of women, aggression being one of the more common. When this opposite gender nature is healthy, as symbolized by the brothers in Bluebeard, it loves the woman it inhabits. It is this intrapsychic energy which helps her to accomplish anything she asks. He is the one who has the psychic muscle where she may have been where she may have differing gifts. He will aid and assist her in her bid for consciousness. For many women, this contrasexual aspect bridges between the worlds of internal thought and feeling, the outer world. The stronger and more integrally the vast the animus, think of animus as a bridge, the more able, easily, and with style the woman manifests her ideas and her creative work in the outer world in a concrete way. A woman with a poorly developed animus has lots of ideas and thoughts, but is unable to manifest them in the outer world. She always stops short of the organization and implementation of her wonderful ideas. The brothers represent the blessing of strength and action. With them, in the end, several things occur. One that is vast and disabling, one is the vast and disabling ability of the predator is neutralized in a woman's psyche. And second, the blue-berry-eyed maiden is replaced with one with eyes awake. And third, a warrior to each side of her, if she but calls for them. Period. That is the end of Giving a Cry. So I wanted to read a short portion of the next area before I move into the naming of the facts. So using that story of Bluebeard, I wanted to read this section of Sin Eaters from Stalking the Intruder, the beginning initiation. I feel like women, but also Black people as a whole, this is a whole word, stay with me now, are natural, unintentional, though, sometimes conscious, sometimes unconscious sin eaters. Bluebeard is through and through a cutting story about severing and reunion. In the final stage of the story, Bluebeard's body is left for the flesh eaters, the cormorants, the raptors, and the buzzards to carry away. Here we have a very strange and mystical ending. In ancient times, there were souls called sin eaters. These were personified by spirits, birds, or animals, sometimes humans, who, somewhat like the scapegoat, took on the sins, that is, the psychic waste of community, so people could be cleansed and redeemed of the detritus of difficult life or life not well lived. We have seen how the nature is exemplified by the finder of the dead, the one who sings over the bones of the dead, which is the first chapter, singing over the bones, bringing them back to life again. This life, death, life, nature is a central attribute of the instinctual nature of women. Likewise, in Norse mythology, the sin eaters are carrion eaters who devour the dead, incubate them in their bellies, carry them to hell, which is not a place but a person. Hell is the goddess of life and death. She shows the dead how to live backward. They become younger and younger until they are ready to be reborn and re-released into life. This eating of sins and sinners, which makes me think of parts of the movie, the subsequent incubation of them and their release back into life once more constitutes an individuation process for the most basic and base aspects of the psyche. In this sense, it is right and proper that energy is drawn out of the predatory elements of the psyche, killing them, so to speak, draining their powers. Then they may be returned to the compassionate life, death, life cycle, life mother, to be transformed and reissued, hopefully in a less contentious state. Many scholars who studied this tale think Bluebeard represents a force which is not redeemable. But I sense an additional ground for this aspect of the psyche, not a transformation from mass murder into Mr. Chips, but more like a person who must be in an asylum, but a decent place with trees and sky and proper nourishment and perhaps music to soothe, but not banished to a backward in the psyche to be tortured and reviled. On the other hand, I do not want to portray that there is no such thing as manifest and irredeemable evil, for that also exists. Throughout time, there is the mystical sense that any individuation work done by humans also changes the darkness in the collective unconscious of all humans. That being the place where the predator resides. Jung once said that God became more conscious as humans became more conscious. He postulated that humans cause the dark side of God to become struck with light when they rout their personal demons out into the light of day. I do not claim to know how all of this works, but following archetypal pattern would look and work something like this. Instead of reviling the predator of the psyche and running away from it, we dismember it. We accomplish this by not allowing ourselves divisive thoughts about our own soul life and our worth in particular. We capture ambiguous thoughts before they become large enough to do any harm, and we dismantle them. We dismantle the predator by countering its diatribes with our own nurturant truths. The predator says, "You never finish anything you start." You say, "I finish many things." We dismantle the assaults of the natural predator by taking to heart and working with what is truthful in what the predator says, and then discarding the rest. We dismantle the predator by maintaining our intuitions and instincts and by resisting the predator's seductions. If we were to list all of our losses up until this point in our lives, remembering times when we were disappointed, when we were powerless against torment, when we had a fantasy filled with frosting and frou-frou, we would understand that those are vulnerable sites in our psyche. It is to those desirous and underprivileged parts that the predator appeals in order to hide the fact that its sole intention is to drag you to the cellar and leech your energy as a blood transfusion for himself. In the finale of the Bluebeard story, his bones and gristle are left with the buzzards. This gives us a strong insight into the transformation of the predator. That is, that the last ask for woman in this Bluebeardian journey is to allow the life, death, life, nature to pick apart the predator and carry it off to be incubated, transformed, and released back into life. When we refuse to entertain the predator, its strength is extracted, and it is unable to act without us. When we refuse to entertain the predator, its strength is extracted, and it is unable to act without us. We, in essence, drive it down into the layer of psyche where all creation is as yet unformed, and let it bubble up in that etheric soup till we can find a better form for it to fill. When the predator's psychic energum is rendered, it is formable to some other purpose. We are creators then. The raw substance reduced down becomes the stuff of our own creation. Women find that as they vanquish the predator, taking from it what is useful and leaving the rest, they are filled with intensity, vitality, and drive. This is the reclamation of power that is coming up with this Pluto transit. Pluto and now Uranus moving into Gemini, that amplification. They have rendered from the predator what is stolen from them, vigor and substance. They render the predator's energy and return it to something useful that can be used, and turn it to something useful. To render the predator's energy and turn it to something useful can be understood in these ways. The predator's rage can be rendered into a soul fire for accomplishing a great task in the world. The predator's craftiness can be used to inspect and understand things from a distance. The predator's killing nature can be used to kill off that which must properly die in a woman's life, or what she must die to in her outer life. These being different things at different times. Usually she knows exactly what they are. To render the parts of Bluebeard is like taking the medicinal parts of the deadly nightshade or the healing elements of the poisonous belladonna plant. Using these materials carefully for healing and helping. What ash of the predator is left then will indeed rise up again, but in smaller form, much more recognizably and with much less power to deceive and destroy, for you have rendered many of its powers, which it applied destructively, and you have turned these powers to the useful and the relevant. Bluebeard is one of several teachings that I believe are important for women who are young, not necessarily in years, but in some parts of their minds. It is a tale of psychic naivete, but also of powerfully breaching the injunction against looking. It is a tale about finally cutting down and rendering the natural predator of the psyche. It is my belief that story is meant to set the inner life back into motion again. It is my belief that story is meant to set the inner life back into motion again. The Bluebeard story is a medicine which is particularly important to apply where the inner life of a woman has become frightened, wedged, or cornered. Story solutions lessen fear, elicit doses of adrenaline at just the right times, and most importantly, for the captured naive self, cut doors into walls which were previously blank. Perhaps most elementally, the Bluebeard story raises to consciousness the psychic key, the ability to ask, I have to go back. Perhaps most elementally, the Bluebeard story raises to the consciousness, the psychic key, the ability to ask any and all questions about oneself, about one's family, one's endeavors, and about life all around. Then, like the wildish being who snuffs into and under and around to discover what a thing is, a woman is free to find true answers to her deepest and darkest question. She is free to wrest the powers from the thing which has assailed her and to turn these powers which were once used against her to her own well-suited and excellent uses. That is a wildish woman. I'll say one transitionary quote from the next chapter, or the next same chapter, next essay, The Dark Man and Woman's Dreams. No matter how old a woman gets, no matter how old a woman becomes, no matter how many years pass, she has yet more ages, stages, and first times awaiting her. That is what initiation is all about. It creates an archway which one prepares to pass through in a new manner of knowing and being. Beginning. I'm just going to briefly read out the titles of chapter 3, Nosing of the Facts, the retrieval of intuition as initiation. The story that's going to be referenced over and over again is about Vasilisa, so I'm just going to read that. And then we'll be done. The doll in her pocket, Vasilisa the Wise. Intuition is the treasure of a woman's psyche. It is like a divining instrument and like a crystal through which one can see with canny interior vision. It is like a wise old woman who is with you always, who tells you exactly what the matter is, tells you exactly whether you need to go left or right. It is a form of the one who knows, la que sabe, the wild woman. In the traditions I was raised in, dedicated storytellers were always off some kind of psychic hill, up to their knees in story dust, brushing away centuries of dirt, digging under overlays of culture and conquest, numbering every frieze and fresco of story they could find. Sometimes a story had been reduced to powder. Sometimes portions and details are missing or rubbed out. Often the form is intact, but the coloring destroyed. But even so, every dig holds hope for finding an entire body of story intact and unbroken. The following tale is just an incredible treasure. To my mind, the old Russian tale of Vasilisa is a woman's initiation story, with few essential bones astray. What it is about, it is about the realization that most things are not as they seem. As women, we call upon our intuition and instincts in order to sniff things out. We use all our senses to wring the truth from things, to extract nourishment from our own ideas, to see what is there to see, to know what is there to know, to know the keepers of our own creative fires, and to have intimate knowing about the life, death, life cycles of all nature. This is an initiated woman. Stories with Vasilisa as a central character are told in Russia, Romania, Yugoslavia, Poland, and all throughout the Baltic countries. In some instances, the tale is commonly known as Vasilisa the Wise. I find evidence of its archetypal roots dating back to at least the old horse goddess cults, which predate classical Greek culture. This tale carries ages-old psychic mapping about induction into the underworld, which is interesting because I did, and if you watched the video yesterday around the new moon in Taurus, I talked about the Ceres story of Persephone, and Persephone being abducted by Pluto or Hades into the underworld. This tale carries ages-old psychic mapping about the induction into the underworld of the wild female god. It is about infusing human women with the wild woman's primary instinctual intuition. The compromise for any literary version of the Vasilisa story spun here was given to me by my Aunt Kathy. It begins with one of the oldest storytelling devices, and once there was, and once there was not. So I won't go into that story necessarily today, but I do think that the titles of the story and the breakdown of the story are significant. The first task is allowing the too good mother to die. In the opening of the tale, the mother is dying and bequeaths her daughter an important legacy. The psychic tasks of this stage in a woman's life are these: accepting that the ever watchful, hovering, protective psychic mother is not adequate as a central guide for one's future instinctual life. The too good mother dies. Taking on the task of being one's own, developing one's own consciousness about danger, intrigue, politic, becoming alert by oneself or oneself, letting die what must die. As the too good mother dies, the new woman is born. In the tale, the initiatory process begins when the dear and good mother dies. She is not there to touch Vasilisa's hair anymore. In all our lives as daughters, there is a time when the good mother of the psyche, the one which served us appropriately as well as in earlier times, turns into a too good mother, one which by virtue of her overly safeguarding values begins to prevent us from responding to new challenges and thereby to deeper development. In the natural process of maturing, the too good mother must become thinner and thinner, must dwindle away until we are left to care for ourselves in a new way. While we always retain a core of her warmth, this natural psychic transition leaves us on our own in a world that is not motherly to us. But wait, this too good mother is not all as she seems at first. Under the blanket, she has a tiny doll to give her daughter. And it goes on. The second task is exposing the crude shadow, learning even more mindfully to let go of the overly positive mother, finding that being good, being sweet, being nice will not cause the life to sing. Experiencing one's own shadow nature, particularly the exclusionary, jealous, and exploitive aspects of self, the stepmother and stepsisters, acknowledging these unequivocally, making the best relationship one can with the worst parts of oneself, letting the pressure build between who is one is taught to be and who one really is, ultimately working towards letting the old self die and letting the intuitive self be born. The third task is navigating in the dark, consenting to venture into the locus of deep initiation, entering the forest, and beginning to experience the new and dangerous feeling Newman of being in one's intuitive power, learning to develop sensitivity as regards direction to the mysterious unconscious and relying solely on one's inner senses, learning the way back home to the wild mother, heeding the doll's directions, learning to feed intuition, feeding the doll, letting the frail know nothing maiden die even more, shifting the power to the doll, i.e. intuition. The fourth task is facing the wild hog, being able to stand in the face of freedom being able to stand the face of the fierce and wild goddess without wavering. That is facing the imago of the fierce mother, meeting up with the Baba Yaga, familiarizing oneself with the arcane, the odd, the otherness of the wilding, residing at Baba Yaga's house for a while, bringing some of her values into our lives, thereby becoming ourselves a little odd in a goodly way, learning to face great power in others, subsequently one's own power, letting the frail and too sweet child die back even further. The fifth task is serving the non-rational, staying with the hag, acclimatizing the great wildish powers of the feminine psyche, coming to recognize your power, and the powers of inner purifications, unsoiling, sorting, nourishing, building energy and ideas. A little thing that I have sectioned out from this chapter was, or this particular from the fifth task was a quote. For many women, this task requires that they clear a time each day for contemplation, for a space to live in that is clearly their own, with papers, pens, paints, tools, conversations, time, freedoms that are for this work only. For many, psychoanalysis, contemplation, meditation, the taking of solitude, and other experiences of descent and transformation provide this special time and place for the work. Each woman has her own preference, her own way. The sixth task, separating this from that. Learning fine discrimination, separating one thing from the other with finest discernment, learning to make fine distinctions and judgments, sorting the mildewed corn from the good corn, sorting the poppy seeds from a pile of dirt, observing the power of unconsciousness and how it works, even when ego is not aware, the pair of hands which appear in the air, more about learning corn, life, and death, poppy seeds. I have two quotes here. Sometimes in order to bring a woman closer to this nature, I ask her to keep a garden. Let this be a psychic one, or one with mud, dirt, green, and all the things that surround and help and assail. Let it represent the wild psyche. The garden is a concrete connection to life and death. You could even say there is a religion of garden, for it teaches profound psychological and spiritual lessons. Whatever can happen to a garden can happen to soul and psyche. Too much water, too little water, infestations, heat, storm, flood, invasions, miracles, dying back, coming back, boon, healing, blossoming, bounty, beauty. During the life of the garden, women keep a diary recording the signs of life-giving and life-taking. Each entry cooks up a psychic soup. In the garden, we practice letting thoughts, ideas, preferences, desires, even loves, both live and die. We plant, we pull, we bury. We dry seed, sow it, moisten it, support it, harvest. The seventh task, asking the mysteries, questioning and trying to learn more about the life, death, life, nature, and how it functions. Learning about the truth. Learning the truth about being able to understand all the elements of the wild nature. To know too much can make one old too soon. Quote, this letting live, letting die is very important. It is the basic and natural rhythm which women are meant to understand and live. Grasping this rhythm lessens fear. Grasping this rhythm lessens fear, for we anticipate the future, and the ground swells, and the emptying it out will hold. Eighth task. And we have the ninth, and I believe that's, yeah, the end. The eighth task, standing on all fours, taking on immense power to see and affect others, looking at one situation in this new light, finding a way back to the old or step family. And the ninth task, recasting the shadow, using one's acute vision, fiery eyes to recognize and react to the negative shadow of one's own psyche and or negative aspects of persons and events in the outer world, recasting the negative shadow in one's psyche with Hagfire, the wicked step family which formerly tortured Vasilisas, returned to cinders. Have any quotes from this chapter? I don't think so, no. To let things die is the theme at the end of the tale. What dies, what must die, dies. How does one make a decision? One knows. For most women, to let die is not against their natures, it is only against their training. This can be reversed. We all know in Los Ovarios, when it is time for death. We might try to fool ourselves for various reasons, but we know. By the light of the fiery skull, we know. Thanks.